Hi there, this is Bruce Kirsch with REFM. Hope you are all well. Today I want to talk about data tables. Data tables are a terrific way to show a range of outputs of a key performance indicator based on changes in certain inputs. In this case, what I'm going to show you is a two-way data table which varies two inputs simultaneously against one another. Let's take a look at this very basic example here. Let's assume we have inputs for rent per square foot and expenses per square foot, and the difference of the two is our NOI per square foot. The building size is 12,000 square feet, which gives us an NOI of $360,000. And let's assume we're going to cap that $360,000 at 7%. Well, the capitalized value of the building, assuming those inputs, is $5.14 million. Now the question becomes, well, what if rents were slightly different? What if expenses were slightly different? What if the cap rate were slightly different? And what we can do with a two-way data table is I can vary both rents and the exit cap rate against one another simultaneously and get a nice report of the spectrum of resulting values. Okay, let's take a look at this following example. Now, a setup of a data table is really important. The setup is critical in terms of allowing it to function. You need to put things together in a way that Excel understands. So what I'm showing you here highlighted in the top row, all formatted as inputs, are various input values for rent per square foot, which we know sits up here in our model in cell C5. Along the left-hand column here, I'm showing different inputs for the sale cap rate, which sits here in the model in cell C11. Okay, and so these are all input values. They are all immediately adjacent to one another, as are these all immediately adjacent to one another. In the cell that touches the first value in the column and the first value in the row, what we do is we map in or link the output value that we wish to see the changes in. So in this case, what we want to do is see how does the value of this property change given changes in rent and exit cap rate. Okay, and so what we do here is we simply do an equals and refer to the coordinates of the output where it is sitting on this tab. One of the key things that people will often run into and their data tables won't work as a result is they will try to map to an output on another tab, and you cannot do that. So even if the performance indicator such as capitalized value is not calculated on this tab, I can bring it to this tab by mapping to whatever cell it exists in on an alternate tab, and then I would simply map to wherever I've brought it into on this tab. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to highlight this entire range, starting with the output cell, and going all the way through the cell that shows the intersection of the final column and the final row. And so this is all selected now. Next, I'm going to do Alt D as in data, T as in table, and that brings up the dialog box. Okay, and it asks me for two inputs. When I see this first input field, which says row input cell, the question I want to ask myself is, where in the model above does the input sit for the values shown in this row? I'm going to say that again. Where in the model above does the input sit for the values that sit in this row? Okay, and so this row is rent per square foot, and so I'm just going to identify where that input is made in the model itself. Okay, for the column input cell, I ask myself the same question. Where in the model above does the value sit for sale cap rate? And I'll simply click on that, and then click OK or hit Enter. And what we see has happened now is we have a range of values that show the intersection of these two variables as they change against one another. And so here is the current case of the model. Okay, was it simply mapping up to what sits in the model. And so if I wanted to prove this out, I can say, well, I should have this value in the table. was I have 65 bucks a foot in the table, and I have a 7 cap. So if I were to look at the intersection of those two, okay, I'll see that is in fact matching to this, which matches to this. If I wanted to take it one step further and make it a little bit fancier, I can put in some conditional formatting which will show the current case value. And I can do that by simply highlighting the interior only of the table, going to the Home tab, Conditional Formatting, highlight cells, Rules, and then equal to, and it'll say format cells that are equal to, and I want to just click the current case cell, and let's make it green, and then click OK. And so now this is going to jump out at me that this is how the model is currently set up. Okay, now if I were to change these items here, okay, assuming my calculations are set to automatic, which they are currently, it will automatically readjust. Let's take a look at an alternate approach. So I'm going to scroll down here, and what I've done here is I've put in the base case assumptions in the middle of the 5 columns here and the middle of the 5 rows here. And so what I've done is I've essentially left space for the other variable input amounts, and I've created a increment input on the right for the rent of $1 per square foot and for the cap rate of 1%. And so now what I can do is I can make these other values calculations based off of this amount. Okay, and so let's do this one first. Equals the base amount plus that, and I'm going to anchor that, and then copy and go one more time there, and then equals the base amount minus the increment, and I'm going to anchor the increment and do that one more time. And let's do the cap rate equals that plus 1%, and then equals that minus 1%. And so essentially what I have here are my row of inputs and my column of inputs. They're not all formatted in bold blue type because really this one is an input and these others are outputs. And so I format them to reflect that. So I can go ahead and do the Alt DT again, and the row input cell and column input cell in this case are constant. And I have my outputs here. And now what I can do is I can very quickly alter my increment and everything will react dynamically.